Welcome back, everyone, to the Rise, Kill, Eat podcast. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the show. The Rise, Kill, Eat podcast is a show that is designed for everyone that loves God, freedom, and the great outdoors. And it's my goal to share the ideas, conversations, and stories of people from all across the country and really all across the world that share that same passion to pursue God, to pursue freedom, and to pursue the great outdoors. And that is exactly what I'm going to share with you guys today with my friend, Matt Carey. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask that if you find any value from today's episode, that you leave a positive rating and review on the podcast platform that you're listening through. I know I've mentioned this before, but these ratings and reviews go a long way in helping the Rise Kill Eat podcast gain some traction in the rankings of podcasts. And every positive one helps us achieve the goal of being able to get this show and the conversation shared on this show into as many ears as possible. A lot of hours and hard work goes into producing these episodes, and every little bit of support goes a long way in allowing the show to continue to exist. I also wanted to ask if you would check out the Rise Kill Eat podcast on the social media platforms. You can find me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, at the handle at Rise Kill Eat, just like the name of the show. On Facebook at the URL facebook.com/RKEafield. And finally on Twitter at the handle RKEafield. Because that's RKE as in Rise Kill Eat, Afield. These episodes are also posted on YouTube on the Rise Kill Eat podcast YouTube page. So if you prefer to listen there, or if you just want to share it with a friend through the YouTube link, then that is also now available. All right, so I'm excited to share today's episode with Matt Carey. Matt is a music producer, associate pastor, hunter, outdoorsman, photographer, amongst many other things, and he's also from the Nashville, Tennessee area. I've had a lot of guests from the Nashville area on this show, and especially lately, and I think that just really tells you how great that and how awesome that wonderful city is, and I think it's just a testament to the city itself. So Nashville, you got it going on, you're doing it right. But in all seriousness, this was a really encouraging conversation and a really great conversation that I had with Matt Carey. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into my conversation with him. I've got Matt Carey on here with the Rise Kill Eat podcast. So thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show, and I appreciate you taking some time out of your day right now. I know things are crazy for just about everybody, but I appreciate you being on the show.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Absolutely. So I was looking, I didn't realize this whenever I first asked you, but you're down in the Nashville, Tennessee area, right?
Yep, that's correct. I've been here. I'm originally from Atlanta, and I've been here since around 2011. Yeah, I love it out here.
I think whenever I saw that, like right before we started talking, I was going back through, and I think you're like the fifth or sixth person that I've had on the show that is from the Nashville area. So there must be something about the Nashville, Tennessee area that just, I don't know, keeps drawing me back in. But what are some things about it that you like?
Well, so I actually moved here for music, of all things. Go figure. I moved here to go to school. I went to MTSU down in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, to study music production. So that's what brought me here. And now I work as a music producer, songwriter, do mixing, that sort of thing, and then I also work at a church. But that's what brought me here, and I still do a little bit of that. So
that's awesome. What kind of music do you do? Of course, with it being Nashville, probably country or something, right?
There's a bit of country. It's they call it Music City, and it's been, I would say, expanding over the last several years. Yeah. I mean, it's growing so fast here right now. For the last couple of years, they've been saying 70 people move here a day, 80 people move here a day, and it's up to like 100, I think. And it's just growing so fast that there's so many different people and different types of music happening. So you go one end of town, it's pop music, and you go another place, it's alternative and grungy, or there's a punk scene. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. So before I moved here, I actually didn't really listen to country music at all.
Oh, yeah.
And I got into it a bit, just working here playing. I play guitar, so I played for a bunch of country people, and then produce some of it as well. But a lot of what I do musically right now is pop production. So I do like I'll build a track for an artist. So some artist comes in, they've got a song, and they want to build it up to something, want it to sound like so and so, or they have their references and all that sort of thing. And so I'll build a track around them. I kind of arrange things and program instruments and all that sort of thing. But it ranges, as long as I'm more about the song, I guess, at this point than I am about the style.
That's really cool. That's really cool that you've been able to do that and being able to, have a field, have a profession where you can literally be creative and be able to, exercise that creative ability. That's really cool.
Oh yeah, it's so fun. I'm blessed to do it, and there's a bunch of other people who've been trying to do it and haven't been able to. So I'm real stoked to be able to do it and still have opportunities now.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably one of those fields that it's like either you got it or you don't, and it just takes a lot of perseverance and of course with anything, knowing the right people and getting in and giving your best and showing what you got kind of thing. I have like zero musical ability,
That's
so
really, I mean, that's the whole thing. I think I always tell people, I was like, if you don't absolutely love it and you can't see yourself doing anything else, then you can probably do it. But otherwise, there's so many other people doing it, and you can make a lot more money doing a lot of easier jobs and put way less effort into it. So you really have to love it.
right, yeah, that's awesome. So you were saying that you are also working with your church. So what's that look like for you? So are you doing some music kind of thing with your church, or what's going on with that?
That's what most people assume.
Yeah,
And
that's the first thing
the
I thought of.
position, yeah, the position I'm in, so I'm an associate pastor there, and I do help with some of the music stuff, but um, that's not really my main role. My main role is kind of partnering with our lead pastor and just helping to serve our people well and make sure that everybody in our church gets the pastoral care, because it's just we've grown from what we had started at, and now not everybody can meet with our lead pastor, or maybe they're not the best person for them to meet with as well. So kind of there's a couple of other pastors on staff as well, and so I'm kind of part of a team as far as that goes, and then help a lot with vision and behind the scenes, kind of arranging the technical aspects of church, the logistical aspects of church, all those sorts of things that you don't want to think about, but you have to.
All the details, all the things that a lot of people, will typically take for granted if they aren't there. So you're the one that kind of has to make it happen, I guess.
Yeah, my role originally started a lot dealing with the Sunday morning service and the Sunday morning experience. What are the guests coming in? What are people seeing? What are they experiencing? Are they feeling like they're getting to know people? Are they feeling like they know what the church is about? Are we providing opportunities for them to get to know people? All those sorts of things.
So what kind of challenges has that kind of presented for you with with this whole pandemic issue that we got going on right now, where a lot of places, I guess it's kind of starting to reverse a little bit now, but a lot of places are kind of closed up. How is that? Has that presented a different kind of struggle with being able to communicate those types of things to the church members and to potentially a new audience?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. Um, I mean, so first of all, I mean, obviously we can't meet, so
Right.
that has presented challenges, and most churches have been able to figure out some sort of streaming thing, and we got a subscription for Zoom. It's a program you can do online meetings and all that sort of thing. So we have moved all of our small groups and prayer groups and Bible studies and things like that all onto Zoom But with that, there's been this new challenge of, wow, everybody gets really tired of only doing these Zoom meetings.
Right. Yeah.
And now we've gotten to the point where I think a lot of people are just so tired of it. They need a break from staring at a screen. And, especially people
Absolutely.
that are out of work, they're sitting at home kind of wondering and watching Netflix and just on all these Zoom meetings kind of, or if they're working from home, that's how they're doing it. So people are kind of tired of it, I think. And so that's been a challenge for sure.
Could definitely relate to that because that's something that I'm dealing with. I know my wife is dealing with. My kids are dealing with. They're all ready to get back out and especially get back to church and be able to
Hmm.
to have those one-on-one type of relationships. I think God made us to come together, and God made us to gather, and he created us to participate in fellowship. And I mean, of course, technology has been a blessing during this time, but it can only do so much. And there's just something different with being able to meet with small groups and be able to meet with the congregation, and listen to the live music in the auditorium, and hear and see the pastor giving a message. And I think it's a much different experience. And like I said, of course, right now, what we've been able to do, what churches have been able to do all across the country, not really all across the world, has been able to reach a lot of people. But at the same time, it's just it can. I feel like it can only go so far, and I think a lot of people are ready to get back out there and ready to get back to the normal routine, especially when it comes to church and fellowship and Bible studies and small groups and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think the fellowship thing, there's only a certain level you can achieve with only the really slightly disconnected technical thing. I mean, it's kind of like having a long distance relationship with all your church members.
Right.
It can work, but it's not the best. And so, we're working through it, but I'm excited. I've been praying this whole time that somehow this whole thing has been used, to reach people that would not normally go to church. And we've actually had an interesting large amount of number of people who have felt more connected to our church now than before because they can easily access it. And then, obviously there's plenty of more people that didn't go to our church before that have been able to tune into a Facebook Live service or whatever. And it's kind of easy for them. They don't have to, if they're a little concerned about church, or they maybe don't feel comfortable with going in, or maybe they feel ashamed with going in, they can show up on this service and don't have to deal with the FaceTime thing, which, may or may not be a good thing, but at the same time, they're there and they can hear the word of God and potentially experience God and meet him and give their life to him. And we've had several salvation stories throughout this. So it's been a really cool thing, even though it's been really challenging and frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and it's given, yeah, like you were saying, those people who, they're interested in church, they want to come to church, but they just don't want to be in the church building, I guess I should say, the church building. And from here they can, with everything going on, they can sit on their couch, click a button, and be attending, quote unquote, attending church, and not have to
Hmm.
worry about shaking hands and talking to people and asking their story and that kind of thing. And for some people, like you were saying, I mean, that's exactly what they need to be able to kind of get that uh, relationship going with God. Hopefully, of course, those continue. And we've been hearing from our pastor at my church here in Kentucky as well that um, we've had salvations just about every week from people that are emailing in
Yeah.
saying, I will listen to your message. Never really attended your church. Live in the area and I gave my life to Jesus today. And it's just real cool to be able to have that experience. And I guess, of course, God always intends for everything to be good, So of course, with this pandemic, this has been inconvenient for a lot of people, but at the same time, it could be something that, a year, 2, 5, 10 years from now, could be something that has changed a lot of people's lives for the better.
Oh yeah. I mean, I really think that the Lord is using this time, not only to reach people who have been far from him, but also to reveal some things to the church as a whole. and I think it's been a bit of a thermometer to the state of the church, and people are saying, okay, where are we at? What are we about? What do we actually need, and what do we maybe need to, trim some fat and get rid of? And I think the church will be in a new spot after all this is over, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next. But I'm excited about it. I think that it's been, obviously there's tons of bad stuff and deaths and sickness and all that's never wanted, but the Lord's using it, and I'm excited to see where we're going from here.
Of course, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, man, of course, I wanted to have you on and talk about some hunting for sure.
Yeah.
So we actually it's kind of cool how we kind of got connected. I don't remember how it first started, but I remember seeing some of your photography, some of your pictures that you were on there, and I think I sent you a message. I don't remember when it was, but basically asking if I could share some of your stuff because I'm not a photographer. I'm not somebody who has that kind of eye. At least usually I don't. Maybe every once in a while I can get lucky and get something, but so whenever I was going through your stuff, I was like, I'm gonna ask this guy if he would, care if we could, if I could use some of his pictures because they looked really cool. And then from there, we just kind of kept talking, and you're giving me updates as we are going through the spring turkey season. So, of course, before we get to that, how did your hunting, I guess, quote unquote, career, your experience begin? Like, who first introduced you? I know a lot of people have the typical dad grandpa story. So, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, mine is very much a non-typical
Awesome, I like
experience.
those.
Yeah, so I grew up fishing. My grandfather was probably the biggest impact in that realm. We grew up going to the lake. They live on the lake now, and so we always just going down there and catching bass and catching crappie, and I guess some people call it crappie the further north you get, but in Georgia we call them crappie. But
I
so
never really know. I don't know if it. I think I call them crappie. I think is what they are, but they're spelled crappy. So I don't know. But
yeah,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no,
But
you're good. It is what it is. Everybody calls me out on it, but yeah. So grew up fishing and that sort of thing, and was always interested in hunting. My dad and his side of the family, they did like an annual rabbit hunt, but by the time I was old enough to go, they weren't able to go anymore, and so I never got to go. And so that was kind of it for my childhood experience. And then went to college and had a friend he had grown up duck hunting, and that interested me, and that was right after all the Duck Dynasty stuff had gone on. So I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't really know much. And never he invited me to go in college, but I never really had the chance. And then probably it was right after I got out of school. This would have been like 2016, I think. And I was like, I really want to duck hunt. My dad's got a pair of, old waders. He's got a shotgun. He's got an old 870 that I could borrow. So I'm going to borrow that stuff and then find a jacket. And then my girlfriend at the time, she lived in Arkansas. So I was able to go to one of the better places to go. And so I went with her family, and I fell in love with it. I mean, the first day we went out there, it was the perfect morning. I had no idea what to expect. We were standing in like flooded timber, cypress kind of area, and just mallards and ringnecks and teal and everything. Gadwall. They were just dumping in. The first bird I shot was a gadwall, and so I remember picking that up, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." And looking at all the details, and I was like, "All right, I'm in." So that's kind of what got me into it and hooked. And then ever since then, I think that next year I bought a kayak. I live close to a lake here in Nashville, and I bought a kayak, and I was like, all right, I can't buy a boat or anything else, so I bought a little bit of my own stuff, and then just started going and figuring it out. Watched a bunch of YouTube videos.
have you ever hunted out of the kayak? Because that's something that I am strongly considering. But of course, there's some precautions you got to take because in January that water is really cold, and if you dump out in that,
Yeah,
of course, that's going to be an issue. So have you been able to get it out and be able to work with it a little bit?
I have hunted actually in the kayak only a handful of times.
Yeah,
Just most of the situations I'm in where I'm looking for a spot to hunt, I can get onto a shore or somewhere in some cover because like most of the time I'm in the kayak, I just can't get any good cover. And I
right.
have I've built like a little bit of a blind with some burlap and all that, but I mean it just kind of stands out. But in the spring it has worked. Uh, during teal season and early goose, I've shot some birds out of there. But it is I have to make sure that I have to choose my shots wisely because I'll have more opportunities than I have shots, if that makes sense. Because like
Yeah,
you shoot right in front of you and it's pretty good, but if you shoot, you turn to your left or your right, side to side, and you shoot that gun, there's a good chance that kayak could tip depending on what kind of kayak you
right.
have. So I've taken some risky shots before and almost gone over, but haven't fallen in yet.
Man, yeah, that's something I've been going back and forth on, and it. I don't know. I still haven't quite made a decision on if I want to do that. But the way you're using it, sounds like I could definitely use by using it to kind of maneuver around in the water to actually get to some dry spots and that kind of thing. And it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that because that's kind of how I got into duck hunting specifically, but uh, basically other species besides whitetail. Is I had a buddy who introduced me. I mean, this was probably this is probably about 6 years ago. Then
Hmm.
he introduced me to duck hunting. That was the first thing that he took me on, and I had never been duck hunting before. I had seen a couple of videos, and uh, but I had no idea what in the world I was doing. I think it was pretty evident too whenever I went out that morning with them, and but he started taking me, kind of started taking me along and stuff, and from there I really got bit by the hunting bug, I guess is what you could call it, and there's something about duck hunting, man. And like you said, whenever you're holding those ducks and just the detail they have and the beauty and the shine that they have on their feathers, man, it's just such a cool experience.
Oh yeah, I think it's I think as far as just thinking about all the different types of hunting, depending on the person, I guess it might be different, but I think it's a really good it if they can get over the cold, it's good for a first time hunter because you can talk, for the most part, you can hang out, and it's an exciting thing too when there's actually something that happens. And there's less things I think you do have to worry about, but a lot of times it's also an adventure, and the scenery you get to see is just unreal.
Yeah, sitting out by the water whenever the sun's rising, and
Oh
you'll
yeah.
have steam coming up off the water, and if you're lucky, maybe it's snowing or something. It's just such a
Oh yeah.
cool
If you're
thing to
lucky,
be able to
we don't get
experience.
we don't get that much we don't get that much snow around
Oh,
here.
really? So we don't really get a whole lot. There's been a few years. I think there was I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we had like a perfect morning. The lake, because I live about 15 minutes from Cave Run Lake, which is on the northeast side of Kentucky, and the lake had frozen over, and the water, the spillway, the river that comes out of the lake, it was still moving. So we set up on that river where the water was still moving, and man, it was a good morning that we had, and I think it was about -5 degrees and a little bit of snow on the ground. It was a pretty good little hunting experience. That was one of my first ones. I think that actually might have been the day I shot my first duck. I think it was actually, now that I think about it. And man, it was a pretty cool experience. And duck hunting is one of those things that I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but like you said, it's something that once you get into, like it's almost addicting. Like you got to get out there and
Oh yeah.
you got to hunt some more, and you got to view the scenery and see everything that's around you, and I mean it's just hard to kind of put into words. And I think you see a lot of that with a lot of different styles of hunting.
I think it's an interesting thing to like I don't know, coming into it from my perspective of this isn't something I've done for, you know, 18, 19, 20 years of my life, but it's something I've only done, for a handful of years now. And I don't have all these old perspectives of like how it should be and whatever. And so there's lots of things too, I think, where I've just been able to just kind of try something, and I don't really have anybody telling me, no, that's a bad idea. And even around here, I hunt places where people don't normally hunt, and we kill birds, we kill stuff, and so I mean, it's an interesting situation.
Yeah, it's kind of giving you the opportunity to to learn on your own and get out there and, you know, like you were saying, I think a lot of people they have those people in their lives, especially when it comes to hunting, that will tell you, you know, don't hunt over here, don't do that, don't do this, and you know, being somebody who's gotten into it much later in your life, I think I've gotten, especially with you know, ducks, turkeys, and doves, and all that kind of stuff. I've had a very similar experience where you just kind of go out there and just see what's working and see what's not, and then try to repeat that next
Yep.
time, and that's just really what it comes down to. So that's pretty cool though. That's awesome. So what did this last turkey season? I know we were kind of talking about it all throughout. As I think it was kind of right. I guess it was towards the end of the turkey season. We were kind of talking back and forth and that kind of thing. So turkey season, it's one of those times that I think it's kind of my favorite. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'd say my favorite. I've got a love hate relationship with turkey hunting, but but it's definitely one of my favorite styles of hunting because, especially whenever everything kind of comes together, just because of the excitement and the spring and all that kind of stuff. So, what are
Uh-huh.
some of your favorite parts of hunting? And I guess you can get into your least favorite. I've got a long list of least favorites, but you can get into some of your least favorite parts of hunting as well, as far as turkeys go.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'll preface this. This year's I've kind of limited myself to one type of hunting a year. Otherwise, I'll just spend way too much money buying gear.
Yeah,
So this
definitely.
this year was actually my first turkey season, and so it was a big learning experience. And I had one friend that was kind of doing it with me, and he had never done it before either. Or I think he had gone once in California or something. So I think those are Rio turkeys out there, and so he said it was a little different. And he hadn't really shot one, I don't think, when he went. So we kind of had no idea what we were doing, and we went out opening day. I had messaged some people and tried to get an idea of where we should go, and I've got some friends who've been doing it for a long time, and so I went to the spot early in the morning. We kayaked out to a spot thinking we'd get away from the pressure and get to a spot where these birds would be, and there was nothing. We didn't hear anything. We didn't see any. Well, I take that back. We did hear one on the other side of the creek. I think he was roosted on the other side of the creek we were on, but he didn't want to come across. And then we just kind of were like, all right, well, let's go get some Chick-fil-A and move spots in the afternoon. And we went to one of the other spots I had scouted and sat there for maybe an hour. My buddy shot a snake, and I'm thinking, man, we're not gonna we're not gonna see anything after that. And an hour after he stands up and shoots a snake, we start hearing these birds gobbling on the other side of this field we were set up on, and it was kind of up on a hill, so we were on the top of the hill. We couldn't really see the bottom of the hill, but we had our couple hen decoys set up out in front of us, but we could hear him gobbling, so we just call. He had a little slate call, and I was doing the mouth call, and over the course of like 30 minutes, these two toms came up and checked our decoys out, and I was able to take one of them, and it was the first day of turkey season, and I shot one my very first time going, and I was thinking, man, this is really easy.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the season was not so simple. But
Yeah.
I think this whole pandemic thing has increased the amount of hunting like crazy in Tennessee. I don't know how it's been for you, but I mean, I'd pull up to places and there'd be 7 trucks parked there, and I'm like, I don't even know why you guys are all here.
Yeah.
You're sitting on top of each other,
See, in years
and
past, I've been able to, you can usually, you know, kind of get it figured out on the weekends because there's going to be a bunch of people out on the weekends, and our season's only about 3 weeks long. So on those weekends, there'd be a lot of people, you know, out. But throughout the week, you know, typically you can kind of get away with the quick morning hunt and that kind of thing. But this year, it seemed like every time I went out, like it could be a Wednesday morning, Saturday morning, Monday morning, whatever it is, Friday morning, and it just seemed like there was people just about everywhere. So I saw a lot of the same thing I think that you saw.
it made it so challenging. And like on top of that, not knowing really that much about turkey hunting, it made it that much harder. And so, I found it was interesting. The places I thought more people were hunting, there was a little less pressure. So we chased some birds around for like a couple weeks, and we'd always see them, but we could never get them to come off private land. They were just all sitting on private land. So that was pretty challenging. I think that was the most frustrating thing, is seeing birds that you can't shoot. You can't get up on them or sneak around them or anything like that. Um, and I ended up with 2 birds at the end of the season. We have a limit of 4 here, and I almost had a third the last week. I went out on the Monday of the last week of season here, and I roosted a bird. I knew where he was, and I set, a couple hundred yards away from the roost, thinking I had known where he was going to go, and he flew down, and I didn't see him after he flew down, and I figured he could have gone one of 2 ways, and I went up, and after about an hour of waiting, and saw some tracks going left and some tracks going right, and I thought, well, if he went left, I would have seen him, so he must have gone right. So I did a big loop around and got out in front of where I thought he might be, started calling, and I mean, he was 200 yards from me, and I thought, here we go, and he just gobbled his head off. And I kept, I moved up a little closer, and called a little bit more, and he was a little bit closer, and so I moved up a little bit closer, and then found a tree and sat. And then he came up above a hill, and he was still 60, probably about 60 yards away, but he was behind trees and brush, and I could see the back of his fan, and I could see the red peeking through the brush, but I never had a clear shot. And it made it, all of those other days of waiting and waiting and waiting, it made it all worth it at that point. And I chased him for the rest of the week and never got him.
Yeah.
So he's still out there, but I don't know if that answered your question, I guess.
But I had some very similar experiences with that, and I mean, there was just so many times that I would get so close, or I was actually hunting a private farm here in Kentucky, and there was multiple times, I think probably, shoot, I don't even know, maybe 4 or 5 times where I would have toms gobbling on the hillside that's on the other property, on the neighbor's property, or I would actually see them through the cattle fence that separates the property boundaries. And it was just, there's so many times where I was so close, but it didn't really end up working out. I actually got a tom. I think it was the second weekend. I didn't get one opening weekend. It was the next weekend. I got one that was out wandering along a cattle fence that was on the property boundary. I just so happened to catch him at a gap where he could kind of slip through and come check out where I was. But man, it's so crazy how these birds are, and how they kind of react to everything, and especially react to calling, and or not react to things like gunshots, and that kind of thing. And it's such a weird style of hunting. I don't know if that's weird, but it's such a different style of hunting, because especially with anybody who has spent any time out deer hunting, like you just get out there and you just kind of sit and you wait, looking for movement, looking for things that are out of place, different. With toms, I mean, you could actually literally sit there and have a conversation with them, or they may slip in and never say a thing. And it's just one of those things that it can be like super frustrating, but also so invigorating. I feel like the ends of the spectrum for turkey hunting are just, it's so extreme, and that's why I have such a love-hate relationship for it. Because so whenever it's going good, I love it, but whenever it's not, which is most of the time for me, man, I'm like, what in the world am I doing out here? I'm ready to get home.
Yeah, it's easy to get in those conversations. You've been sitting there for a couple hours, and you're like, all right, I'm wasting my time now. I could be doing something else. And then you hear something, or you hear it, and then you're like, all right, I could sit here for another couple hours, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one, it was actually the second to last day. I was on my way back to the car, and it was probably close to 11 o'clock, I was just doing some calling as I was going along, and I get a tom that starts gobbling like probably maybe 150, 200 yards in front of me, and I literally this ended up being about a 3 hour ordeal. I end up getting him up to the top of the ridge, and I'm sitting there waiting on the edge of the tree line, and he steps out probably about 60 to 70 yards away from me, which was about 30, 40 yards from where I wanted him to come out. And right about the time he starts strutting and coming towards me, uh, another tom on the opposite side of the field that had no idea was there, he starts gobbling, and the one I'm after, like right away, breaks his strut and takes off running towards that other tom. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I've been sitting here for 3 hours working on this bird, and then all it takes is that little bit, and I was like, okay, I think I'm done.
Yeah, it's it's frustrating, and we were hunting on public land here, and I mean, especially living so close to a major city, there's people just walking through the woods or doing whatever. Like one morning, I was on this bird, and there was so much brush and cover in the woods, and it had just rained. It was so quiet. I could walk and sneak, so I could hear him gobbling in front of me. I was trying to sneak up on him and get close enough where I could, I hadn't called yet, so he didn't really know I was there, but I could hear him. And I got close, and I sat along the edge of this little trail that I figured he was walking down. And I mean, maybe 5 minutes later, a guy comes with his German Shepherd just running off a leash down the path, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I've
There
been
goes
sitting
that.
out there for so long. I was like, well, that bird's gone now. But yeah, I think my favorite thing about it was just that trying this whole most people call it the run and gun approach.
Mhm.
Just like walking around trying to get something to strike up, and you can only do that so much on some of the public land depending on how many people are hunting out there. But um, that was just the fun thing for me is like moving around, and you didn't have to sit in one place the whole time. And it sometimes I move and screw myself up, but that's another story. But
Yeah,
um,
definitely. Absolutely.
that was the fun thing, is just kind of like exploring and learning a piece of land and trying to figure out. It's like, all right, well, I might hunt an area for 3 days and walk around and really figure out, okay, this is what the birds are doing, and then actually hunt on the fourth day. I would have loved to shoot something the other 2 days or the other 3 days, but the hunt didn't really start, I don't think, for me until the fourth day of learning this new piece of land. So that was really fun. But the most frustrating thing was, I think, because so much pressure. Like, I mean, there was probably weeks that we had, because our starts in like very beginning of April, and then ends like that uh, second week of May.
Yeah.
And so we, I mean, except for maybe the first 2 weeks, birds barely made any noise. They might make noise on the roost. They didn't gobble at all when they hit the ground, and so it made it so challenging.
Yeah, it's hard
And
to hunt when they're like that.
yeah, it's like I don't know where they are, where to go, and then so you just kind of hope, you sit in a field that you saw them in, and hope that that's where they go that day. But I think that was the most frustrating thing I was trying to figure out.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, our season, it starts here in Kentucky. I think this year it was April 18th, which I think just how the calendar kind of worked out, it ended up being a little bit later than I think in the past years. And it ended on May 10th. So I think it was 22 days on the calendar that you had to kind of get it done. We've got a two-bird limit here. But yeah, I experienced a lot of that same kind of stuff. And it was just, there's so many close calls, but those close calls is really what makes it, all worthwhile. And it's kind of
Hmm.
what fuels you to get back out there and want to try it again. Because, like, you got so close this time. And maybe if I do something like this time, then it'll work out. And then whenever you pull that trigger and you see them flopping on the ground, it's like, yes,
Yeah.
got it done. And that's awesome. But so, of course, we talked a little bit about your photography. When, being somebody who got into hunting, being somebody who got into the outdoors much later in life and didn't necessarily have that upbringing, when did you start kind of kind of putting the two together with the photography and with the hunting? When did you start actually taking your camera into the outdoors when you're hunting?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to do photography, and I I think it was. I mean, when I was in middle school, I had like a little. My parents got me this little point and shoot Lumix camera, and I was so excited. My friend had a nicer DSLR, and I didn't have that, but I could do some cool photos or do long exposure things with it and get some pictures of lightning. I was like, oh, this is sick. But then, I'd always wanted to get a nicer camera and get into photography, and just probably this was no, it was I've really only been doing it for like a year and a half maybe. And so I bought this camera used off of Facebook Marketplace, and well, I actually borrowed before I had that. Actually, I borrowed my neighbor's camera. He had a Canon, and it was maybe like 18 megapixels, and it was super slow. Like the shutter was super slow, and the thing I wanted to photograph was waterfowl, and so it's like
Yeah.
any action shot you wanted to do was just not possible. But it was still fun. It got me real interested in it, and he let me borrow that for, 6 months to a year. I feel like, and then I bought my own camera. So maybe I've been doing it longer than that. I guess. And maybe it's probably closer to 2 years. But I had been hunting, and I had taken some pictures with my phone, and my buddies had taken pictures, and I was like, I have an Instagram account for my music stuff, but I don't really want to post these things on there, and it doesn't really fit. And mostly, all I would use social media for was marketing anyway, so it didn't make sense to post anything. And so I just decided, I was like, okay, well, I'll make another account for like hunting stuff, and I can post, photos of dead birds, and people won't, freak out about it.
Right. Right. We appreciate that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, so I that's how it started. I did that, and then posted a few photos, and didn't really. And then that account just sat there for a while, and then once I got the camera, I realized like, oh man, I really like doing this. When I was borrowing the camera, and so I kind of like thought about it a lot and prayed about it a lot, and I was like, wow, this whole thing of in Romans 1:20, it
yeah.
talks about through the creation, through all things are created, people will be without excuse. They'll know about God. And so I was like, all right, I like taking photos and all that sort of thing, but I want people to experience what I've experienced through hunting. I've just on my own, and going out and being alone out in the woods or on the water, and just spending lots of time being quiet and all of that, and just it's helped me to just grow closer to the Lord. And so I was like, how can I started strategizing. I was like, how can I use this passion for photography and passion for hunting to point people to the Lord? And so it started for me with a goal like that. And so
Yeah.
and so then I came up with the little handle, my Instagram handle is Of the Field. And I was reading about Nimrod. It talks about Nimrod in the Bible. He's a man of the field. And then you've got Jacob and Esau, and Esau is this hairy dude, and he loves to hunt, and his dad's stoked about it, and he gets to eat some of the food. So it's like all these guys of the field, and I was like, okay, what is of the field? Where somebody of the field, they're learning things about the way the world works, and I think they're connected to the Lord in a different way. And so how can I kind of bridge that gap for maybe some people who have never experienced that just the same as me, and maybe don't know that they love this. And obviously there's also not that many people that hunt. I think compared to historically, at least in the United States, there's a lot less hunters give to the population size than there has been in years and years. So that's kind of how it started for me. But yeah, the camera I have now is by no means like a super nice camera, but I bought something that I could afford. It's a Canon T6i, and I bought that and have a couple cheap lenses for it, and just started learning how to do photos, watching a bunch of YouTube videos, learning how to manage all these settings and all that sort of thing. It's kind of, I've learned a ton from that, and I've, like you mentioned earlier, I get lucky sometimes, and I'd say it's the same thing. I take a lot of photos. I'll go out in the morning and take probably, if I, depending on how long I sit out there, I usually take 1,000 photos, and I end up using not very many out of
Yeah.
that. you know
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. That's cool that you have, taken something that you're passionate about and used it for the good and used it for, of course, spreading the message of God. And that's really what inspired me kind of in a similar way to do the Rise Kill Eat podcast. Of course, Rise Kill Eat comes from Acts chapter 10:13. And it's
hmm
a verse that's not necessarily about hunting, but it kind of, reaffirms that connection that we have with our food and with God as the provider. And you were mentioning Romans 1:20. That's one of my favorite verses, and it's so cool to actually be able to get out into creation, like the earth and everything. Like all these things they weren't created by people, and I think a lot of people kind of take that for granted. Like these are naturally occurring God created things that we get to go out and experience, and we have an opportunity to see God in His creation because of it. And the whole act of hunting and getting out and pursuing these other created beings and these other animals and being able to consume them, it's such a cool process. And to do something that Nimrod and Esau and all these people throughout the Bible and throughout history have been able to do, and we can still do it today, thousands of years later. And such a cool thing. You were mentioning earlier how Duck Dynasty kind of played a big part, and that's kind of how I think it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago that they were really starting to emerge. And I think that show, I know it did for me at least, it kind of it established the hunting world and the spiritual world and kind of meshed them together. And I think it really
Wow.
touched a specific group of hunters who are who enjoy hunting, and then also, of course, are Christians. They love God, they love Jesus, and I think it reached that community, and it allowed for people to see that you know you can be a Christian, you can love Jesus, and you can be somebody that is going to hunt at the same time. Like you can be somebody who loves creation and be somebody who also enjoys consuming animals. You know what I'm saying? So it's such
Yeah.
a cool thing that we've been able to do with our platforms. And a lot of people they have these huge platforms like the Robertsons. They have a podcast now which I listen to like just about every time they put out an episode. And but there's also people who like you, like me, and there's people from all over the country that have that same love for God and that same love for hunting and the outdoors. And it's such a cool experience being able to have these conversations and that kind of thing. It's awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, I think just come from what you're saying, and from my experience, I think there's a thin wall between the spiritual realm and what we might call the physical realm. While I think that they're one and the same,
Yeah.
I think that there's a thin wall between the two when you get to the creation, because like, I don't know, from my experience, I get out there and I'm doing stuff, and personally, I obviously have said that I get a lot from that time
Hmm.
and all of that. But even from a ministry standpoint, I'm sitting out here not even trying to start a spiritual conversation. It's like I'm sitting
Yeah.
here with my friend and we're hunting, and I really don't know this guy that well. We've been out, hanging out downtown a couple times, but it's like not, I really don't know this guy that well. And we're sitting there hunting, and then he starts talking about how he wants to get back to his faith. And I'm like, what in the world's going on?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, then I had we draw for public blinds here in the Nashville area, and the guys in our blind, they were calling me the preacher. But that is a funny thing. But even there, I was like, all right, there's all these opportunities that I'm not even, other times I had been looking for opportunities to share with people, and now here I am, they're just like dropping in my lap. And so I think there's a thin wall. It doesn't have to be hunting. It can be the creation as a whole, because I think a lot of people get a lot out of, hiking and camping, all these sorts of things. But especially in the time and age we're in right now, we've gone so far from, we try to be so self-reliant. We live in these big cities. A lot of people do. Even if you live out in the middle of, so suburbs, you're still not really out in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of hard to find those places depending
Yeah.
on where you're at. And so I think, like, as a culture, as a people, as human beings, we've ran away from really being out in those areas. And for most people, it's so far from that when you get in those places, people say, I get chill bumps. Oh, it was so pretty, or whatever. And, I think there's a thin wall there. So I think it's an exciting place to be at, and it's filled with opportunities, just like that Romans 1:20, like we were talking about. I think that it really explains that. But it's a fun thing.
It really does. It really does. And when you can't help but be out in creation, it could be hiking, it could be camping, fishing, hunting, whatever it is. You can't help but being out there and, really starting to kind of open up spiritually, like what you were getting at, because it does that to you. I mean, I feel like it's a natural occurring thing, and it touches you in a way that, I don't know, it's hard to replicate that. And I think the conveniences of life and the technology and constantly looking at screens and, seeing pavement and all that, those kind of things, I think we just get so used to that we think that that's where we came from. But,
Mm-hmm.
in reality, looking back, we can use in the Bible as a historical reference, or, other books or whatever it may be. And you can see that, at one time we were out running the fields, we were out running the mountains, we were pursuing these things, and we were out doing this in a natural way that, back then they didn't have cars, they didn't have
Mm-hmm.
pavement, they didn't have street signs and street lights and all those kinds of things. They had to figure it out in a way that made them reliant on God and made them reliant on creation itself. And I think that's really what uh, probably stems from Romans 1:20, is that the idea that, getting back to the roots and getting back to seeing God as the creator and seeing God as the provider. And that's such a cool experience. I know it has been for me personally. I know it has been for a lot of people. So that's really cool. But man, I didn't realize it, but we're getting up here on time. So I definitely want to respect your time. I don't want to I could sit here and talk with you for, hours on this. So, but of course, with this being the Rise Elite podcast, I usually try to keep these around an hour. So I want to make sure I respect your time. But I do have a few more questions for you.
All right.
And this is one that, I kind of came up with, that I like asking my guests kind of as we're closing, as we're wrapping up. And I get all kinds of different responses from it, and I'm interested to see what you have for me. So I think I kind of prepped you for this a little bit, but my question for you is, what does hunting mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, what it means to me, I mean, at this point, it's kind of like, I don't know. Last year, I spent a lot of time learning about the Sabbath and just learning how to rest. And hunting has been an ends to a means for me, as far as finding that place and finding that time. So, especially with, waterfowl hunting, so you got to get up so early, you got to get to a spot before anybody else, and, set up before 30 minutes before the sun rises. And so, there's a lot of downtime. And so I've, used that to learn to rest. But I think that's a huge thing for me. Is what I found is, like, I'll take a day, and Thursdays, if you want to get a hold of me on a Thursday, you usually cannot. I will be out somewhere away,
Yeah.
either fishing or hunting, and um, that's my time of rest. And if I get anything, that's fine, but that's not the goal for those days. And it's just a time to just get with the Lord, get away, try to listen to Him, try to shut up, and
Right.
and be quiet. And that's really hard to do sitting at home, tempted by Netflix what and Instagram and all of these other things. And while those things may seem like rest while I'm not working, I do not feel filled up
Yeah.
after spending hours doing those things. And so that's been a big part for me. And the other thing I would say is that it's forced me to try something new. And I think the further along you get into your life, it's really easy to just say like, well, I kind of know these things. Whatever path you're on, I don't know everybody's story, but I think it's easy to say, I know what's going on. I understand this. I feel comfortable here, and um, it's really easy to get kind of stagnant. And you talk about your faith, you can talk about your career, anything. I think it's really easy to get stagnant the older you get. And so for me, hunting was a bit of a humbling thing. So I jumped into something new. I didn't know anything, and it helped me really learn a lot more about myself, about the Lord, about how I interact with other people, how I can love on other people better, um, and all sorts of things in between. But I think helped me to learn to try something new. And so and then the photography came with that, and that's just been a blast as well. And I've met a bunch of cool people through that. And so I that's one of my passions now is just I want to get people who maybe they've hunted before, but they're interested in hunting, or maybe they don't know they're interested in it. Be able to take them out, provide those experiences, be able to teach them, let them see things they've never seen before, and try something new, and and maybe learn something about themselves, maybe learn something about the Lord. And I think that's one of the bigger things that I've kind of come out of it with, and am seeking to do more and more. It's just a really fun thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's a great response to I feel like is something that's a pretty tough question, and but it's awesome that you mentioned rest, because that's very true. I mean, I think it's important that we take a day where we you know honor God, and we find something that's going to truly fulfill that rest that we so deeply desire, because just sitting at home and swiping through Instagram isn't necessarily going to do it. And it's, for a lot of people, it's not going to do it, because I mean it's just not something fulfilling. And that hunting has found that for you, or has fulfilled that for you. That's awesome. That's really cool. I mean, Bible tells us that Sabbath was created for man, not man for the Sabbath. So God gave us that opportunity as a gift to be restored and to be fulfilled back into Him. And that's cool that hunting is something you're able to do that with. That's really cool.
Yeah. Now I cannot. I hate it when I miss a Thursday.
Yeah,
when I for me, I mean, obviously I'm working at a church, so Sunday is that day for a lot of people, but I had to find another day.
yeah. You gotta
And
find one of the 7 days, right?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, man, I can tell a huge difference in my week, in my life, in my thought life, all of those things when I miss that time. And so I mean, it's I deem it necessary, and I wonder how it took me so long to actually dedicate that time and actually have a Sabbath versus you know just I would say not going to maybe work. But I don't know. I heard a message on the Sabbath, and it made me really think about it very differently.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we did a whole series at our church. It was I think he titled it "Hurry," where it's basically
Hmm.
just about that, just finding your rest, and finding that spiritual fulfillment that you get from your rest, and honoring the Sabbath, and taking a day to put everything down and just kind of recalibrate. But yeah, man, that's awesome. And thank you. I really do appreciate you being on the Rice Kill Eat podcast with me. So where can they find your work? Where can they find you? And where are you as far as social media and all that kind of stuff goes?
Yeah, so I'm pretty much only on Instagram, just being a photo guy right now. So you can find me. It's at _the_field, and I'm on there if you want to contact me. If you're a photographer person and you were hoping we'd talk about some more photography, just shoot me a message. We can talk about that. I'd be happy to talk with you and message with you and help you out. But yeah, so I'm on there, and I'm actually working on a YouTube channel that's focused on helping people who want to get into stuff. They want to get into hunting. They don't, know where to start, or they just really, the goal of it is to push people to try something new. So for me, the hunting stuff was new. The photography stuff was new. Now I'm getting into all sorts of cooking because I got all this meat I got, so I got to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
And
that's a good problem to have.
Yeah. So now, right now, I'm working on a video for doing making a bunch of sausage out of all of my like diver ducks, and so I'm excited about that. I'm about to go work on that after we finish. But yeah, so I'm working on that, and that'll be under the same title of the field, same thing. But I've probably got some probably 10 videos I've got done. I just got to start releasing them. But you can find me in either one of those places, and send me a message, give me a follow, and I'd be happy to chat with you and get to know you for sure.
Awesome, man. I'll make sure I have that info in the show notes so that people can just go right down there, click on that, and it'll send them right to them. But thank you so much, man. I appreciate you being on the Rice Kill Eat podcast, and man, I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, Tyler, thanks so much for having me, man. This was fun.
Yeah, it's definitely my pleasure. I appreciate it, man.